certain format. And that format that we're going to use for this class is the MLA format, which is explicated in this book, which is one of your supplementary texts for this class. The MLA method is used because it's one of the most widely adopted methods for having formats for research papers across the United States. It's also the format that will be required of you in college by your college teachers. And they'll expect you to know this. They're not going to be teaching it to you in your composition classes. So to start off, I'm going to hand out, I have two sample papers here. The one to look at first is the bottom one, the one titled Spurn of Goodness of Sin. So just keep that one handy. Okay, to begin with, first just a few basic things. When you type your paper, if you use a typewriter, you want to make sure that the ribbon you use is a fresh, clean ribbon that's not like smudgy or too unclear, because you want your paper to be as easy to read as possible for the instructor and to be as neat as possible. If you use a word processor, if you happen to have a program, you'll want to use a letter quality printer. You can use a dot matrix, but they're a little bit harder to read than the letter quality. And don't use any fancy script or like type it in red or anything else. It has to be in black. Okay, the type of paper that you'll use, you'll want to make sure you use 20 pound, 8.5 inch by 11 inch paper. As you can see on here, the mark this paper is 8.5 by 11 inches. That's just standard size typing paper that you'll find in any bookstore. But make sure you use the heavier bond paper, not erasable bond paper or paper that's so flimsy that you can see through it, because that makes it more difficult for the instructor to read with this corrected paper. If it's easier for you to use erasable paper because maybe you make a lot of mistakes or your typewriter doesn't have a correct type on it, just make sure you make a Xerox copy of your paper, and that'll be the one that you hand in to me next week. I'll expect your paper to have no mistakes in format because I'm going to show you everything right here, plus you have your text and you'll have the sample paper to look at when you do your paper. Okay, so first we'll start with the margins. Research paper should have 1 inch margins on all sides. So you can see on the top here, it's 1 inch, 1 inch on the sides, and 1 inch on the bottom. The only exception is when you put your name at the top, your heading, that'll be a 1/2 inch. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Okay, next we have the spacing. The entire research paper is double spaced. You don't use any single spacing, any triple spacing, or anything like that. Double spacing throughout the paper. And then after you make sure you double space it, now for your heading here, you don't need a title page for a research paper. They used to, but the MLA standards change, once in a while. Every couple of years, they'll sometimes put out a new edition and modify it and improve it according to what, feedback they get from teachers or from students or just anyone, and then they'll change it and modify it to make it the best that it can be. So the way they have it now is that at the top, you start with your name, which is, of course, 1 inch in from the left-hand margin. You double space, then you put the teacher's name, which is my name. You put Miss Pereira. Next, double space again, put the title of the class, which for this class would be Advanced Composition. And then at the bottom, you put the date the paper is due. And this is the method that's being used most widely now. Is you put the day, the number of the date, like May 1st, you put the 1 first, then the month, and then the year, with no commas, no punctuation at all within the date. Okay, now for your title comes next. You double space after the date, then your title will come. Don't type your title in all capital letters, no bold facing, no underlining. Just your basic title. You can see on the sample what paper that you have. The title is just simply typed normal with your usual capitalization of the important words except the prepositions and things like that. Every paragraph you'll indent 5 spaces, which is standard, indented 5 spaces from the left-hand margin. And if you have, say you're using a quote that's longer than 3 lines, that quote will be set off from your margins, your 1-inch margins on the sides. That will come in 10 spaces on each side if it's a quote that's longer than 3 lines. Your heading, we'll get to that now. That's your name, your page number right up here. You notice it's the last name and the page number. Note you don't put page numbers on the bottom or at the top, middle, or just the page number on the side. You simply put your last name and the page number. The reason you put your last name is because when I'm correcting your papers, say I'm walking down the hall and all of a sudden I drop everything, it scatters all over the floor. I can pick up those papers and I can sort it because your name will be on each page along with the page number. Okay, and then come to, say you want to make your paper kind of fancy and you decide to put like a graph or table or an illustration on it. Then we use, there's a special format for that. Okay, here's an example of a table. If you're going to use a table, make sure you write table and number it. For example, if you have more than one, you'd have table 1, table 2. Here, for example, we have table 1. Then you give it like a title. This one is, for example, Language Immersion Program of the State University of New York. Okay? And then you set up your graph. You make columns. Make sure the columns are neat. Make sure everything is flush to the left margin all the way down. And then for your, if it's numbers, as you can see here, the number we have here is just a 6, right? When you put the next number, you make sure they go in columns, just like when you're in your little math class and you're doing addition problems. You set your numbers up just the same way on a graph as you would in a mathematics class. And then, of course, at the bottom, you have to state your source on your table. So you can see the source here is, it has the author's name, the title of the article, where it came from, and the date and the page number. That's very important to make sure that you do document any table or graph that you use in your paper, because otherwise it's plagiarism. Okay, say you have an illustration. I know I'm not an artist, so it's not the best drawing in the world. Your drawing or illustration, say it's a map, can be a graph, or just say an interesting picture that fits along with your paper. For this, it's different than on the table because you call it figure, and you label it, you number these too, and you abbreviate it FIG, and you number these also. So you'd say figure 1, and then you'd put a caption on it. And then after, you can have whatever kind of a caption that you want, whatever caption you think describes what your illustration or your map or graph is explaining. And then, of course, a documentation again at the bottom. Everything except your drawing is left flushed again to the left side margin, and you make sure that when it's a figure or a graph, it's at the bottom, underneath the illustration, instead of at the top of the page. Okay, now, when you put your paper together, I don't want to see staples. I don't want to see those fancy report covers you get in the store. Simply use a paper clip. Because staples, when I'm correcting your papers, I'll have to remove the staples and then redo a staple, and it gets to be really tedious. And even though report covers may look nice, they're actually more of a pain than they're worth. So simply a paper clip, which can be easily removed, I can correct your papers and put the paper clip back on, and there's no hassle at all. Okay, that's all I have for overhead. Now you all have in front of you 2 sample papers. Now does someone have an extra one somewhere? The extras. Okay, now lay them down in front of you, side by side. You can unclip this one so you can look at both pages of the China one. Okay, now I just want you to take a few minutes and look at these 2 papers and figure out one of them uses the correct format and one does not. And I'm sure you can all tell by now which one is correct and which one is not. So just take a few minutes to look it over, and then I want you to tell me what is wrong with the one paper in the format and how you would change it. So just think about that for a couple minutes, and as soon as you're ready, just raise your hands. found mistake yet?
This one has a title page. Should have a title page.
Okay, good. Yeah, this one has a title page. And you remember I just said a few minutes ago that you don't need title pages anymore on research papers. Very good. Anyone else?
Your title on this one is all capital letters.
Very good. Yep, you'll notice the page here, the title's on top, it's centered, which is right, on the page, which is right, but it's in all capital letters. Okay, good. Anyone else? Yes?
Page number at the bottom.
Yep, remember the page number is supposed to be at the top with your name in front of it, and then the page after it, 1 inch from the margin. There's still a few more you need to notice. Just look at, for example, on the title page, how it's set up. What's wrong with it? Yes?
The date on there.
Yep, the date's in the wrong place. You know, the date's like, it's a date like this, 5/16/86. Use the different date, the way I showed you.
Not double spaced, you need class.
Yep, it's not double spaced. Notice it's single spaced, and also it's at the bottom right-hand corner. Does anyone notice a few more small ones?
The spacing between the title and the first paragraph.
Very good. That was what I wasn't sure if anyone would notice. Yep, notice after the title, there's 3 spaces. It's not double spaced, it's triple spaced. Good. Okay, there's just a few more small ones when you're just looking at the title in the corner here, or the information. First of all, it's single spaced, and if you'll notice, it's inverted. The class is up on top, and the teacher's name is underneath. Those should be switched. So, and when you're doing your paper, you'd take this and you'd move it to this page. You wouldn't have a title page, it would be at the top, and all double spaced. Very good, you're very observant, picking up the mistakes there. Well, now that you all have your text at home, and for tomorrow, bring all your materials with you, your rough draft, any information, and for half the class, I'll be talking about how to revise, how to take your rough draft and pick out the mistakes, because when I handed them back to you, there was a lot of corrections on them. And we'll have half the class, I'll explain how to do revisions of your rough draft to come up with your final draft. And also half the class will be a work time. So make sure you bring your materials with you to work on in class for the second half tomorrow. And then if you have any questions, I'll be available during class to answer any of your questions. That's all for today. Thank you. So, it's your 4th year of college. You have a final paper due. You've blown it off all quarter. It's the last week. So you madly rush to the library and do your research really fast, get the paper handed in. Okay, 3 days before graduation, what happens? You get called into the instructor's office, and he tells you that you failed the course. Why, you ask? Plagiarism. You did your research so fast, you didn't take careful notes, and you committed plagiarism, you fail the course, and you don't graduate. How do we avoid plagiarism? Taking careful notes is the best way to avoid plagiarism, along with making sure you document all your sources. So today I'm going to just talk about the 3 methods of note-taking, and then you're going to do just a little practice on those 3 methods with some articles that I brought. Okay, the first thing to remember is you all know I've told you that you use note cards to take your notes on when you research. So you'll have your note cards, you'll go to the library and get the sources that you're looking at, okay? And you've got your bibliography cards too, that's what we discussed last time, which has all the bibliographical information on them. Okay, so on the top of your note card, you're looking through your book, and you look, page 69, here's a great piece of information that you want. You'll make sure that on the note card on the top, you'll write the author's name, the source, and the page number, so that you can, when you're writing your paper, you'll know where you got that information from. How do you take notes? Well, the first method is by using a summary. A summary is simply when there's like a large piece of information that it's just like a broad general idea that you want to use. You just summarize that whole thing. and you make sure that you document it. Then, when you paraphrase, a paraphrase is when there's, just like a sentence or a short passage that you want to use, but you don't want to directly quote it. So what you do is you take that passage and you write it in your own words. There's a few guidelines for when you paraphrase. You don't, find a great passage and just say, well, I'll just change this word, and that word, because that's plagiarism. It doesn't work. Also, another thing you can't do is, just find the passage or whatever, and I'll just switch a few words around here and there, and then think that's okay, because that's plagiarism too. Even if you do document it, it's still plagiarism. So the best way to do it is, when you find that piece of information that you want to use, you simply, one way that I do is you look at it, close the book, and write it in your own words. That's the best way. That's the easiest way to make sure that you don't just copy the words. Now, the third method of note-taking is the direct quote, which is the easiest in some ways. So when you do a direct quote, there's some, you find a piece of information that is really good just the way it is, and you want to just directly quote it. So you just make sure you use quotation marks, of course, around any quotation, and you quote it word for word, even if a word is misspelled. You quote it word for word, and any punctuation that's within the passage, you make sure that that punctuation is in there also. Okay, and even on your note card, make sure you put quotation marks, even though it's not in your paper, because that'll help you distinguish, those notes from the other ones that are paraphrased and summarized. So here's a little handout that has these guidelines that I just talked to you about. And I want to give you an example of a paraphrase, since that's the most difficult one to get right, because so many people do want to use those two techniques of just, changing a word here and there, or just switching the words around. So, okay, I have this article about, I'm sure you've all heard of Joe Clark, the principal. Okay, and there's a statement right here, second paragraph, it says, "Yet many of Clark's opponents flatly reject his harsh disciplinary tactics, which have resulted in the expulsion of the very students who probably could benefit most from a structured program." A good paraphrase of that would be, Joe Clark, a strict disciplinarian, is opposed by many people who believe that his policies are too harsh and that he expels the students who would benefit most from a highly structured environment. So when I did that quote, I read that. I thought it was a good, strong piece of information for a paper, and I just put the article aside and wrote it in my own words. Okay, now what I want you students to do is I have 3 different articles here today. And you have your sheet with you that I just handed out. It has the 3 methods of note-taking. I want you to divide into groups of 2 or 3, each with an article. It's the first group here. You can get the Joe Clark article. Okay, second group. Here's one about getting a second opinion for surgery. And you get one about doctors who take drugs. Now, what I want you to do is just, use each of the 3 methods of note-taking. You don't have to read the entire article. Just kind of, flip through it, and if you see something that stands out, just a piece of information, then just write them down and get down all the 3, and I'll be walking around and just checking to see how you're doing on this.
information and stuff that you think would be good in your paper.
Yeah. We can say what
Yeah, summaries are good for those paragraphs. Large amounts of information doesn't necessarily mean like a whole article or like, several paragraphs. It can be just one paragraph or several sentences that have a general idea of what I'm looking at. Well, it doesn't matter. You can do whichever one you want first. Whichever one you think, gives the information for you to do that. Should be at the end of your article. You don't have to worry about that. As long as you know that, you do need the office and you can just. You can also do this in the. Yeah, this is more of a summary. Yeah. Here's just a summary too. So it's first summary. So you have two summaries. You've got to find the other two now. Get it there for one. Sure. Find it. Okay. That's very good, yeah. Can't paraphrase any better than that. You got a summary here? Those are some two summaries. Okay. Even something like this, some people it's almost like common knowledge, you sort of have to state your source. Because this isn't your joke art. It didn't come right out of your head. It came from an article. What? But you got it from this article. See it in the summary, you said, right? Or did you just think of that? That's what I say, like, okay, if you're in the summary, it's in the summary, it's in the article. What's said in the article? You have to understand better. No, you don't need it done if it's in, like if you take out, say you took out a word inside the quote, then you put the ellipsis in. But if you just, that's the three dot. Yeah, so you just simply, we're just put the quotation marks wherever you want to go. and then your punctuation will come inside the quotation marks. Good. I'm gonna put paraphrasing. You have more difficult articles to work out. Yeah. See, this is one you'd have to really sort through the whole article because there's a lot of actual information in there. If we had more time, we'd have more time to sort through it. If you were in the library or whatever, you'd have more time to just sort through all that, yeah. Okay, but yeah, that's just the average. Notes that you're putting on the card. Oh, that's...
Yeah, like even like this quote there, they don't know if the year was not.
No, because you're just paraphrasing, you're not directly quoting. Okay, now you've all gotten some practice on paraphrasing. And when you hand in your research papers to me, certain papers, I will go to the library and check your sources. So make sure that you do take your notes carefully. And for next time, I'll expect you to have 10 note cards ready. And I want you to use each of the 3 methods. Doesn't matter how many of each, as long as all 3 are represented. And you'll hand those cards in to me and I'll evaluate them. And I'll be handing them back to you. And that doesn't mean you only need 10 note cards for your whole paper though. I just pick out 10 and hand those in to me. That's what we'll do for tomorrow. Okay.
All right.
This weekend, right? Missed the big party out at Pitt's on Friday night and sat in the library and did all your research for the paper. Right? Well, it's time to put all that research together, and what we're going to talk about today is doing the final outline for your paper, which the outline is very important because that's the structure for your entire research paper. And you want to make sure you have your outline is very detailed, very organized, and that you stick to your topic. We already talked when we talked about the thesis, about how you have to live at your topic and not, get information that's like way off in left field. You want to just really, really stick to your topic and limit it so your readers don't get lost when they read your paper. Okay, the first thing to do when you start to work on your outline is review your notes. You of course have your note cards. Just go through your notes and keep referring back to your thesis. And as you're going through your notes, just toss away the note cards that don't go along with your thesis, that don't really closely relate to it. Then you just kind of take your notes while you're looking at them. You'll notice that a lot of them, when you're looking through them, they'll fit together, different note cards. So kind of just arrange your note cards in first you can start by just organizing them in groups, like that it's on the same kind of information. And then you can take those groups and then put them in a logical order. And then once you find those connections between the information, you can begin writing your outline because you've got all your information right there. Now there's several organizing principles when you're doing your outline. There's 3 basic organizing principles. The first one is time. Like say you're doing a paper on history like John F. Kennedy or something like that. You can go in a chronological order. And that would be how your outline would be based, would be on this chronological order. You base it that way. The second type is space. That's when you have like a description paper and you're just, like describing, say, some event, like the Olympics. You're talking about, you have a research paper on the Olympics this year, you could organize it that way. And the last one is logic. Now this is when the paper that's an argument, like when it's a persuasive paper, or that's when you organize it, like you can either go from the general to the specific, or the specific to the general. And all these concepts are covered in your MLA handbook that you all should have with you. And they describe it, and they have examples in there that you can look at. We'll be looking at that today. Okay, and then your method of outlining.
the way you make your outline will depend on the type of paper that you're doing. You'll organize it differently. Like if you're doing a descriptive paper, it's going to be organized in a different way than, say, a chronological paper. The descriptive paper, you would kind of organize it by space. And your outline would reflect that. And then, like I said before, like the history paper would be the chronological order. Now, there's two types of outlines. Okay, you can start off with the one that I prefer is the sentence outline, which is where your outline is complete sentences. Complete, subject, verb, object, all that fun stuff. Now, the second type of outline that's most students like to do this one more because it's a little bit easier. It's just the topic outline, which I have sample part of an outline here that I'll hand out. And this one's a topic outline. And if you look at your handbook, you can see that this is outlining the chapter on using the library, the first part of it. So I'll hand these down. You can just kind of look at it. That's just your basic topic outline. You'll notice too, on the outline, for the introduction, you don't give the introduction a number. Or if the conclusion was on here, the conclusion wouldn't have a number either. And I'm sure you all know how to organize your outline. You have the numbers, Roman numerals, then letters. And Roman numeral 1 should connect to Roman numeral 2, along with, like A should connect with B, and then 1, 2, they should connect together too. And we've already discussed when we talked about the preliminary outline, how your outline should be set up. Okay, so what I want you to do today is I've got just a short piece here from, you'll recognize this from the handbook. I want you to just practice in your groups here as you're sitting and outline this. So you kind of get the feel of how an outline goes. Now just work on that for a few minutes, and if you have any questions, just ask, and I'll be walking around in a few minutes once I've given you a chance to work on it.
you need information from the spreadsheet. How's everybody doing on that so far? Is anyone close to done yet? You're already just cruising along there. So why don't you finish this good and we'll chip that on the board, then we'll just compare it to what everyone else has. Okay? Okay, now while he's writing this up on the board, I want you all to just kind of compare and see how your outlines compare to his, and you'll see how well we picked out the important information on this little couple paragraphs here that we outlined. Okay, did you all get taking notes as the main heading, most of you? That's pretty easy because that's just the heading. Usually a lot of times in outlines too, a heading like that, when you're outlining someone else's work, is usually like four outlines compared so far. They're pretty close to what he's got. Because no two outlines are ever going to be exactly the same. Just kind of compare and see how the information that you picked out compares with the information that he picked out. While he's writing up there, can anyone tell me why outlining is important?
It helps you to summarize like what it was talking about so that if you go back you don't have to read it all over again.
Okay, good, yeah. See, for this outline, we outline what someone else is doing. But you can see, when you look at the outline that you've got, both using the library, when you look at your handbook, you'll see that that's an outline of that entire chapter. And what the author did was he made the outline first, and then he wrote the chapter from that outline. Because we use the outline as like a skeleton, it's almost like a skeleton you can compare it to for the paper. You know, it's just a brief overview of what your paper is going to be about. And the outline helps you to limit your topic. It's a good way to help you limit your topic when you're going through your research. Okay, how did it work? Can everyone see
see that on the board? Are yours pretty close? Similar? Very good. Okay, now for next time, what you're going to be doing is making your outline for your research paper. And I want your outlines to be complete, detailed, and it should flow in a logical sequence. Because that's, when you're limiting your topic, I don't want to see research that, some certain material that doesn't have anything to do with your paper, because then the person who's reading it will just get lost. So when you're doing your outline, sort through the notes that you have, and if you find any irrelevant information, you just toss it out. Don't think if you find some great piece of information that might sound good, and you might, a lot of students will try to use this big piece of information to impress the teacher. Believe me, I won't be impressed. I'll just get lost. So just make sure you limit your topics, because when I grade these outlines, I'll be looking at how complete, how organized, and how logical it is, and how well you stick to your thesis. So when you hand in your outline on the top, you'll write your thesis, and you'll organize your outline according to, you've got the sample kind of here with the introduction, doesn't have a number, the conclusion doesn't have a number. Only the parts of the body will be given letters and numbers. And you can do either the topic or the sentence outline, but just remember, I do prefer the sentence outline. So that's all for today, and I'll be expecting those outlines to be handed in.